Sing first. Okay, I'm going to try to sing with my mask so I don't just project all over, but I'm going to talk without it. The Gospel of the Lord from the book of Luke. Jesus, filled with the power of the Spirit, returned to Galilee, and a report about him spread through all the surrounding country. He began to teach in their synagogues and was praised by everyone. When he came to Nazareth, where he had been brought up, he went to the synagogue on the Sabbath day, as was his custom. He stood up to read, and the scroll of the prophet Isaiah was given to him. He unrolled the scroll and found the place where it was written, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim release to the captives and recovery of sight to the blind, to let the oppressed go free, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor." And he rolled up to the scroll, gave it back to the attendant, and sat down. The eyes of all in the synagogue were fixed upon him. Then he began to say to them, "Today the scripture has been fulfilled in your hearing." The Gospel of the Lord. Okay. So when Judy sent me the readings for today, I was delighted with the New Testament lesson. It's one of my very favorites in the whole Bible, about how, a foot, just because it's not a hand, is still an important part of the body because the hand can't walk, so that's what I'm going to talk about today a little bit. And I don't pretend to be a scholar. So I may say some things that I think are right, but really aren't. So just bear with me. I'm doing the best I can under the circumstances. Hello to everyone on Zoom. So first of all, one of the things that seems to me to be a general thing that happened when the church was becoming established, and Paul and all of his disciples, if you will, were moving around all of the places around the Mediterranean Sea, trying to make disciples of Jesus Christ and trying to tell everybody what's happening. This is so exciting, is that these communities would be kind of seized with a fervor. We see that sometimes in cults today, and we see the same thing happen where everybody brings all their stuff and they put it in a pot, and everyone lives pretty much the same. So you had rich people who came and they put in money, and poor people who came and they could eat decently for a change and all that kind of stuff. And then, they were preaching that Christ is coming. The second, Christ is going to come. He's going to come any day. He's going to come any minute. And then that didn't happen. And so here's all these people, and their stuff is in a pot, and Jesus hasn't come yet. And is this really going to happen? So the way that I kind of see this is that probably not just Corinth, based on Paul's letters, but the Romans, the Philippians, all of these people, we're starting to get a little restless. How do we do this? How do we live? How then shall we live? And I can imagine they were kind of starting to fuss with each other, and then Paul hears about this, and he's, way over on the other side, and he can't hop on a plane. He has to get on a ship if he's going to come. And that takes some days to get there. So he wrote letters. Nowadays we just text people. Paul wrote letters, and he wrote very well reasoned letters, because Paul was trained in reason, and he was trained in that kind of thing. So his letters often read like, here's my position and here's my defense of it. I can just imagine that Paul was writing to these folks in Corinth who were, fussing about who was best, and well, I speak in tongues and you can't do that. Well, I'm going to pretend to. So there, you can just kind of imagine, because as things evolve in societies, it's like, well, this is the most special gift ever. And because the speaking in tongues only happened after Christ left, in a room, where the apostles, Jesus' disciples, were speaking in languages that people in the audience could understand, but the languages they had not studied, languages they didn't know. It was truly miraculous, and so that was a pretty special gift. And then there was like Paul himself, who was an apostle. He was called to do this. I mean, God hit him over the head with a bolt of lightning on the road to Damascus, and that'd get your attention if nothing else would. Then other people could teach, and some people had the gift of laying on hands and healing people. And it's like, well, my gift is better than yours. Well, my gift is better than yours. Oh my heavens to Betsy. And then there's the other side of that same equation, where you have, you feel inferior because, oh man, that guy can speak in languages. That lady's the best teacher. Oh my gosh, those kids, they're in 5th grade, the worst age ever. And when she speaks, they just sit like they're glued to their chair, and they're mesmerized by her. And if I go into the same 5th grade class, they're going to be swinging from the light fixtures. I mean, it's not going to be the same experience at all. Or that person over there makes cleaning the church look effortless. I mean, they walk through the school, and all of a sudden everything's orderly and the floors are swept, and they just made it, they just have a gift for that. Or that person can preach like an angel sounding a horn. Oh my heavens, I wish I could preach like that. I just want them never to stop. And then that lady over there, she makes the best casseroles. And every time somebody's sick, and every time they have a surgery, there's a casserole that magically shows up at their house, and it's good. It's not one of those that you say, oh, God, I hope that Freya will eat this, I mean, it's a good one. And I don't ever think to do that. Or he's the best gardener, and somebody else is the best singer or poet or banker or baker, and the list just goes on. And then, if you're thinking that way, you can get really resentful because you're not the best singer, or you're not the best preacher, or you forget to take the casserole, or that's just not your thing. You make lousy casseroles and it, your dog won't even eat them, so you don't take them. So we can act either from too much self-respect or from too little. We can behave the same way. We can act in a way that's ugly. We can put people down. Well, I don't have that gift, so it's not very important. And I think a lot of bad behavior in tribalism is based in insecurity, to be honest with you. So, here's Paul, and he's got these churches all over the place, and people are just not behaving very well, and they're not being very loving, and they're not accepting one another, and they're fussing, and they're impatient, and they want Jesus to come today. So here's poor Paul scratching his head. He might even be in jail. You never know. Paul was in jail a lot. While trying to figure out a good way to explain to people that nobody's better than anybody else and nobody's worse than anybody else, as long as everybody's devoted and sincere. So here he is. What's wrong with you people? Nah, probably not the best way to go about this. Can't you just respect each other and appreciate your neighbors? And that could be a little bit off-putting. So he thinks, and as usual, Paul hits a note that we can all hopefully understand. Paul was really good at this. We need to learn to get along with each other because we are one body, whether we're in a town, whether we're in a church, whether we're in a business and we're employees. Together we can prevail, and each of us separately cannot. We can't. Some of us have the gift of sight. We're the eyes. We can see where things should be going. We have vision. Some of us can sing. And I'm saying us as a body here, not me. Some of us can sing, and we might be the mouths. Some of us give rides to people who have had surgery and they can't drive themselves yet, or they're too old and they can't drive themselves ever. But some people go and they take them over to Vail. Hey, let's have a day out. Let's have lunch, you know? Maybe they're the feet. I don't know. Some bring food, some give clothing, some visit the sick, some can donate more than others can. That one's tough because in our society, we put a whole lot of emphasis on being able to give money. You know, it's like we forget about being kind. We forget about taking the casserole. We forget about a lot of things. We think that money's the big deal. I've heard folks say they didn't want to come to church because they couldn't afford to give like some other people do. And I think that's the saddest thing ever, because they have other things that they can do. But they might be willing to be in the choir or be in charge of potlucks or do the bulletin or sit in the back and make sure the sound system is working properly. And everything that everybody does seems so effortless. It's one of those invisible ministries that Father Wayne told us about when he was here. You know, I mean, the altar just magically looks beautiful every Sunday. And I know that that's because Joe and Kim and Kathy and Dorothy work hard at it. And I might have left somebody out, but I know about those guys. And they come in faithfully, they set stuff up faithfully. And to the rest of us, it's just part of our experience. It's wonderful. Paul's analogy of the church being one body is so perfect. If everybody could give a lot of money, but nobody could lead the Bible study or be in charge of the potlucks or do the bulletin or take a casserole or drive somebody or whatever else, teach Sunday school, I mean, whatever you do, we'd be a pretty dysfunctional body if you think about it. We need us all. We're all the children of God and members of his body here on earth. I remember once when I was much younger, I was a commercial lender and I was in California, and there's a lot of industry in California. And I used to go and visit the factories and workplaces and stuff of the people to whom the bank lent money. And I was visiting a business that made shrink wrap. And now you don't think a lot about shrink wrap or saran wrap or whatever, but the way that the stuff is made is they have this giant donut thing. I mean, it's like maybe 48, 56 inches in diameter. And inside this donut, they melt plastic beads, and they have boxcars of beads that come in. I mean, these guys made sure they had a rail spur at their place of business. And then there's like this big blower. So it's like a kid blowing bubbles. And this big thing of plastic just goes up from this donut thing. And it goes up, powered by this huge blower, into a cooling tower that's at least as tall as Grace Church is here, where it gets cool enough to where it can be sort of bent over a set of rollers, and then it comes down, and then there's all these rollers down here and some razor bladey things, and it's cut into whatever width it needs to be, and then it rolls onto rollers. And there's a guy who stands there. And the thing is, you can't remelt this plastic. It's once it's melted and blown, it's done. So there's a guy that stands there and he watches these things roll up. And he watches to make sure nothing weird is happening, because man, that thing is hard to stop. If you have to stop and do something, you can cut off one roller and get it going again, because that's probably how you change rollers. I didn't get to see that. But, in my family, the ultimate compliment was that you were smart. It wasn't that you were beautiful. It wasn't that you were rich. If you were smart, you were the thing, we all did like real complicated math problems, and the other half of us did real complicated word things. And that's just what we did. So here I am, I'm walking to here. I think that, the best thing ever is to be smart. And the owner of the business looks at me, and we watched this guy watching the stuff roll up. And we went into the other room, and he goes, he says, you don't want anybody who's very smart doing that job. And I said, well, why? And he says, because somebody who's really smart is going to get bored. They're going to get bored in about 15 minutes. They're going to start looking at their phone, or they're going to start, thinking about their date tonight, or they're going to start doing something else. They cannot stand there all day long and watch plastic roll up on rolls. It's like, you're absolutely right. I couldn't do that job. There is no way in the creation that I could stand there all day long and watch plastic roll on rolls. It just never would happen. And it's like, that to me was a revelation. It was just, I'd never thought about it before. He was absolutely right. And I started to pay attention at that point. Later in my career, I was a manager of people, and I'd always try to develop everybody so, they could be promoted if they wanted to be, so they could make more money, blah, blah, blah. And one lady, one time, she was really, really good at what she did. And it's like, well, let's do this and she looked at me and she goes, I don't want to be promoted. She goes, I don't want that responsibility. I just want to do what I do. And she was really good at it. And so throughout my life, I've seen all of these times when, something that I think is obvious. They teach this in negotiating classes too. Don't assume that the thing that's important to you is the thing that's important to the other person. Don't assume that what drives you drives them. So I don't know. I think it's just magical the way that we meld into one body. My sister and I, Lois, we're so different. One day she said to me, she was a bookkeeper, and her boss was like the CFO or whatever of the company's chief financial officer. And she said, man, Michelle, she's amazing. She just, all of these things come in, and she takes these problems and she thinks them through and figures out jobs. This is how you do this job, and this is how you do this job, and and that's what I love to do. If I get a new problem and I have to figure it out, I'm all excited about it. It's a good thing. And then I figure out how to do it, and I figure out the steps, and I tell somebody else how to do it, and then they do that job. And I would die if I had to do that job every day. Oh, but something like a bank or a business can't work if it hasn't got a good bookkeeper. If you don't have somebody answering the phone and telling them what their balance is today. It's just amazing. So I think it's so interesting how this speaks to real life so very well. Whenever I think, I understand how things are and how they can be made better. Maybe we need to take a step or two back and kind of look at how they really are, and appreciate everybody whose work makes a difference and whose reality is different from ours. We're all different, and we all have different gifts. All those gifts are important, and the body depends on them. Weird things like kidneys and intestines and lungs and icky things, we can't live without that stuff, so if somebody looks like, I love Dirty Jobs. I don't know if you guys ever watched Dirty Jobs or not, but the star would go in like
he'd go into the sewer with the guys who work in the sewer and get just, oh my heavens, messed up. But I loved that show because it showed all the things we need to live in the society that we're used to living in. And somebody's got to traipse through all of the sewage and unplug stuff because somebody flushed a paper towel. Oh my good. So Paul, I think Paul's just got it. He's absolutely right. He appreciated that. And he was able to write to these churches who were getting restless and give them advice about how we all need to take a step back and appreciate one another. We all make the body function together. Amen. Okay, let's see what's next.